It's my distinct pleasure this morning to introduce and welcome the Rollins School of Public Health 2024 commencement speaker, Mr. Jason Carter. Jason and Emery go back a long way. In 1975, Jason was born at an Emory hospital. Now, Jason, we only deliver cute babies at Emory. What happens after that, unfortunately, we don't have any control. Nevertheless, we're pleased to welcome you back here for this important ceremony. Throughout his life, Jason has shown a deep and enduring commitment to public service, which includes his time serving in the Peace Corps in South Africa. That experience is captured in a book that was published in 2003 called Power Lines. If anyone is interested, it's available on Amazon. Jason assures me that the cost of the book is not a reflection of its value. $6.60 this morning, if anyone is interested, but you can get a free copy from him. Jason has been a staunch defender of human rights issues throughout his legal work, serving Georgians in this important state. And through more than 20 years of leadership at the Carter Center and since 2015, its chairman. The Carter Center was founded by Jason's grandparents, the former President Jimmy Carter and the former late First Lady Rosalyn Carter, who had an immeasurable impact on global communities rooted in important work throughout the world. The focus of the Carter Center, waging peace, fighting disease, and building hope, has been its inspiration. You could say public service and public health are in Jason's DNA. His stewardship of the Carter Center includes critical initiatives on eradicating disease and addressing mental health, priorities that have been the guiding light for the Carter Center since its inception. From his professional life to his own experience as husband, father, son, and grandson, Jason has seen the ways and forged the path in which public health touches each and every one of us. His life's work will continue to help and improve the health and well-being of the countless people in this state, the countless people around the world, and communities that are afflicted with disease. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Jason Carter.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor to be here, and to, I think, be called ugly, but I'm just kidding. I have a fond place in my heart for the Rollins School of Public Health, for this institution, and for the work that you all have chosen. Many years ago, when I got back from the Peace Corps, I spoke at a Rollins orientation, and I think half of the people had just been in the Peace Corps. I don't know if that's still true or not, but I appreciate it, and I congratulate you, as Dean Fallon said, on your graduation from this remarkable, remarkable institution. As you might imagine, given my upbringing, I've gotten a lot of advice about how to give a speech. And so I thought I would let you guys know the one piece of advice that I think is the most important. And if you learn nothing else from this today, it's this. You have to have, for a good speech, a good beginning. You have to have a good ending. And you have to get them as close together as you possibly can. So that's my goal. I don't know if the beginning has been that good. But here's, so you know where we're going. I am going to talk briefly about grandparents. That'll be the beginning part. And then at the end, I thought, I'm sure there's grandparents here, and maybe we should just give a round of applause for the grandparents. But just so you know that it's going to build to sort of a crescendo at the end of this, the end of the speech is going to be the secret to wealth and power. So you can get excited about that. The first grandparents that I want to mention have already been mentioned, and they're my own. As you know, my grandfather is Jimmy Carter and was President of the United States and won the Nobel Peace Prize, etc. my grandmother, Rosalyn Carter, was one of the most impactful advocates for mental health that we've ever had. And there are ways in which growing up in that family have led to a different upbringing for me. When I was 20 in 1996, they sent me to Gaza City. When I was 21 in 1997, I went to Liberia, war-torn at the time, for months. And I've been back to Liberia 5, 6 times since then. But in other ways, they're just like totally regular, normal people. And they're just like all of y'all's grandparents, assuming that your grandparents are sort of like rednecks from South Georgia. They used to buy a bunch of stuff at Dollar General. That was like their number one place where they would shop. They, have trouble adjusting to the times. My grandfather, even a few years ago, sent me this. Well, so I have, when he calls me on my phone, it comes up and it says Pawpaw. I called him Pawpaw. So Pawpaw Mobile, and I answered the phone. I was like, "Hey, Pawpaw." He said, "Who's this?" I said, "This is Jason." And he said, "What are you doing?" I said, "You called me." He said, "I didn't call you. I'm taking a picture." And I was like, you definitely don't know how to use your phone. They have a microwave in their house today that ticks. Like you turn it to 2 minutes and it's like, tick, 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 tick. You know what I mean? It takes 15 minutes to pop popcorn. But they are normal people. They are normal people. And one of the lessons that I think they teach is that they have done incredible things in their lives, but when they look in the mirror, they see people from small town, 600-person village, really in the middle of nowhere. When they grew up, they didn't get shoes until they went to school, right? And that element of who they are at their core as just regular people is crucially important for this discussion today, and I think where we're headed in this world. The other grandparent I want to mention is my great-grandmother, named Lillian Carter. She was born in Richland, Georgia, which is about 8 miles from Plains, and by her late 60s, she'd made it all the way from Richland to Plains, which is 8 miles. And she was a nurse. And she saw this advertisement on TV that said you should join the Peace Corps, and age is no barrier. So she turned 70 in the Peace Corps, which means it's not too late for anybody here, by the way. And I think that her experiences in India infected our whole family. And she worked in public health. And she did work with people on the ground in that community in ways that brought her home, little old lady from South Georgia. And she was sitting there when my grandparents left the White House, and she was saying, "I turned 70 in the Peace Corps. What are you going to do?" And today, as has been mentioned, the Carter Center has programs in over 70 countries, half of which are in Africa, dedicated to health and peace. And I think that effort, in many ways, is traceable to their life as small-town people and to her experiences in India. And this is going to bring us to the last grandparent I'm going to mention. But when I left for the Peace Corps in South Africa, as a result of that heritage, I was stationed in this little village in the middle of nowhere. Nelson Mandela was the president at the time. The post-apartheid struggle had begun. The residue of apartheid was everywhere. But where I lived, part of that residue meant that people carried their water from the river, and they built their houses out of sticks and mud, like an African village that you have in your mind, except you could drive 2 hours, and you would basically be in Druid Hills, and you could go to Starbucks and eat at a McDonald's and, see a movie with Dolby digital surround sound. But this grandparent that I met there, we called her Gogo, which is the Zulu word for grandmother. My greatest party trick is my Zulu is still pretty good, but I'm not gonna share it with you now. I apologize. You have to wait for later. But I rented this room from her in this village, and she had lived her entire life constrained by apartheid. She was born in a place reserved for black people. She had jobs that were reserved for black people. It told her where to live, where to go to school. The curriculum in her school was designed to teach her, quote, according to the statute, in accordance with her opportunities in life. And the jobs that she had available to her were defined, specifically reserved for people who had her skin tone. And when she was old enough to work, she went to Johannesburg and worked in a sweater factory. Then she got a much better job working for a white family in Pretoria as a maid. And in 1975, she was forcibly removed from her home in Alexandra and taken to what they called her homeland, where she had never been, and she was dropped off, literally at a crossroads in the middle of nowhere. And then I got to that place 23 years later. And Gogo was the president of the school governing body. She was the head of the Methodist Church and the Methodist Church group. She ran a women's gardening project that had gotten an award from the United Nations. She was the landlord of a huge complex that had a store, a mechanic shop, a dressmaker, shoe repair place. She was the postmaster, and she was the principal of a preschool that she funded and founded on her own that had 40 students that she taught math, English to, and fed them 3 times a day. And for most of those kids, that was the only time they ate. And the question that I ask myself all the time is, what would she have done if she had been Jimmy Carter's grandson instead of having the life that she had? And the question I ask for you is, what would she have done if she had been able to go to the Rollins School of Public Health and get her degree and been in the class of 2024? And her life and the impact on her community is as successful and powerful as any other grandparent that I've ever had, and I think all of those other grandparents would agree. And that brings me to this first secret of wealth and power, and that first secret, you already know it, but it's recognizing that you have it. Gogo had it, really, in that tiny village, and she used it to change her world. And sitting here today, you have it. And, to whom much is given, much is expected in return. That's what the Bible says. But it also says we have to fix our eyes on things that we cannot see. And so wealth, to me, it's not a matter of what car you drive. It's a matter of what roads are open to you. And so as you graduate today, I hope that you know that there are no closed roads. And I hope you won't be consumed by this quest for wealth and power that we sometimes think of, because the question is not how do you get it, but what do you do with it? And that brings me to the second point on wealth and power, and say what you have chosen to do already. It really is the same choice that my grandparents made when they left the White House. My grandfather had been the president of the United States. He was involuntarily retired. And what they did with that platform is what really you have chosen to do with your platform. They devoted themselves in many ways to public health. And yes, it's true that they've done a lot at the Carter Center, and the Carter Center has democracy programs in countless countries, including many of the ones that I heard today, Liberia, Guyana, Sudan, Mali, etc. And for 30 years, they have fought for both peace and justice in Israel and Palestine. But the bulk of the work of the Carter Center has really been in public health because, as has already been mentioned, it is a human right. And just to give you one example of that public health work, I'm going to talk about guinea worm disease. You may all know about it. But in 1986, guinea worm disease inflicted 3.5 million people every single year. And it was essentially a disease of poverty. It existed in the most marginalized places in the world, almost all of it in Africa, and it cannot be eradicated with any medicine. The only way to stop the transmission of guinea worm disease is to change the way that people collect their water. And the way that people have collected their water in many of these places has been the same from literally the dawn of humanity until now. People scoop it out of a river or out of a watering hole and carry it home. And what you realize today, guinea worm disease is going to be the second human disease ever eradicated. Last year, instead of 3.5 million cases, as you all probably know, there were 12. And the way that that disease is eradicated is not by people from Atlanta. It's by entering into every single little tiny village, every 600-person village in Ghana and in Nigeria and in Mali and in Ethiopia and South Sudan and Uganda, and saying, hey, this is a community that if you're Jimmy and Rosalyn Carter, you recognize as a place with real power to change their lives. Because that's where they came from. They don't look at that village and think, wow, this place needs our help. They think this is a place where I can find a partner with power to change that community. And that's who eradicated guinea worm disease, is community health workers in every single one of those little communities who talked to their neighbors and said, this is a better and different way to transform our lives. Those human connections are what eradicated that disease. And I think my grandparents have worked in that effort with Bill Gates and with the World Health Organization and with some of the most powerful people in the world. But their greatest lesson about power is seeing it in everyone and recognizing that the power of a small town person or a single human being in a particular village to change their own community is just as important as other types of power. You will have to navigate political and institutional power. But sometimes we get so focused on the picture of power as a president of a university or a country, and we lose track of the more human power that all of us have. And we talk about injustice, we talk about inequalities in the world, and we talk about helping the most marginalized people in the world, and we have to do that. That is our quest, but we don't want to let that get twisted in this way. We don't want our focus on marginalization, our focus of pity, to undermine our ability to see the power that people have in those communities. I talked to you about Gogo and the way that she changed her world, and I wanted to put up this picture of her because to me, that's a picture of power. She looks to me like someone who eradicates disease, someone who inspires her community, who changes the world. And as you go out into the world to do the work of public health, my hope is that the human connections that you have, that you build, allow you not only to help people, but to feel like you have partners like her as you do that work. Thank you.